Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, friends. Uh, this is Dinesh Suna, the Program Executive of the Ecumenical Water Network of World Council of Churches. And I'm based here in Geneva, where it is just about 7 a.m. in the morning. Welcome to this webinar. The title is, as we know, Food from Oceans, Rivers, and Lakes, jointly organized by various programs of the WCC, the Ecumenical Advocacy Alliance, Ecumenical Water Network, Youth and Ecumenical Engagement, and several member churches and regional ecumenical organizations. Friends, just a reminder, if you do not speak English and would prefer to listen to in another language, such as French or Spanish, please, you can see at the bottom of your Zoom window that there is a globe icon and where you can click and prefer your choice of language that you want to listen to. There is interpretation available. Friends, as we know that water is vital for life, rivers and lakes not only substantial freshwater sources and therefore vital for meeting the drinking water needs of the people and animals of our planet. But at the same time, we know about 70% of freshwater consumption of human beings is for agriculture and food production. In addition, we seldom talk about the food that is available in our water bodies, such as the rivers, lakes, and most importantly, in the vast oceans. The aquatic food is also known as the blue food, such as the fish and other seafood. And about 3 billion people, almost half of the world's population, depend on this blue food. However, the health of the water bodies are being degraded by climate change, pollution, unsustainable overfishing, mining, etc., and thus endangering the health and livelihood of billions of people and causing irreversible damage to our biodiversity of our world. So friends, therefore this webinar will try to explore three objectives. I want to remind you that the vital role of water bodies as a source of food for humanity. Another objective would be to learn lessons from good practices and initiatives that protects and nurtures the water bodies to sustain livelihood and care for creation. And finally, to reflect on the biblical reflection on developing the links between creation, food, water, and sustainability, etc. And we have eminent resource persons present amongst us today to talk about this topic. And we would have sufficient time also to discuss among ourselves in small groups. And here I would take a pause and invite my colleague, Ms. Joy Eva, the Program Executive of Youth and Ecumenical Engagement of WCC, to say a few more words about the webinar. Thank you very much and best wishes for the day ahead.
Thank you so much, Dinesh, for this warm welcome to all our participants joining in right now. As a young person, I remember not even 20 years ago that my mother is actually a retired elder or clergy of the United Methodist Church, and she has been assigned to two different fishing communities, fishing villages in the Philippines, while my father grew up in a fishing village. So if you could say, I really grew up having the experience to just, as kids with my friends, if we wanted to eat crabs, we will just go near the mangrove area and then use our rubber slippers and then just try to catch crabs. So we have something to eat for snacks or even dinner with my friends. Or during low tide, we would go and pick up some clams on the seashore to have some soup for the evening. So this has been the case when I was growing up, not even 20 years ago, coming from the Philippines. And as introduced by Dinesh, I'm Joy Eva Bohol. And in living in the coastal area, having lived in coastal areas, really I have seen how important the bodies of waters are. And in the past years, going back to the Philippines, visiting these villages where my mom used to serve as a pastor, I've noticed that even my friends are eating sardines, canned sardines, because it is very difficult for them to actually fish within the municipal waters, within nearby the different fishing villages. And recently, last year, sadly, one of our representatives, the congressperson in my island city, just proposed a bill to actually expand, to include the municipal waters for commercial fishing. This means that those people, small scale fisher folks, could no longer will only have a very short range of the place where they can fish, because now if the bill will be passed this year, then the big scale commercial fishing that are using really destructive means to fish the different resources in that area will be expanded to the municipal waters. Then the local small scale fisher folks will have competition, and also this is a very big destruction to a lot of communities, to more around 2 million fishing communities in the Philippines. And I'm not even that old. As a young person, I have seen this drastic change less than 20 years. And I am really very concerned about this and alarmed. And a lot of marine life activists in the Philippines have been lobbying to oppose this bill that could destroy, or that could really impact negatively to a lot of communities, especially during this time of COVID, and not even beyond COVID even. And so this webinar or this conversation will really help us to expand more, or to explore more, and about what, the importance and what we can do, actually what we can do about this as people of faith. And as we know in John 10, Jesus said that Jesus came here to have abundant life for all. And abundant life for all is not only for a few, it's not only for those who are some percentage in the world's population, but for all of creation, not even just for human beings, but for all of creation, including life in all these bodies of water. And so our hope is that as we listen in to the different inputs of our speakers, and as we also listen in to the different stories from people in small group discussions, as we share our own stories, we will also be strengthened and encouraged towards this work of peace and justice, to a better life and to an abundant life that Jesus prayed and Jesus hoped for the entire creation. So growing up, I hope as young people also we continue this work of justice, to oppose bills like what I have mentioned in our different contexts and different parts of the world, so that communities can strive, and communities can also survive with what they have, with the resources that are already available in their different places, and stop this big this bills, or legislations that hinders or oppress the people who are deeply in need in these different areas. So I hope, and I really look forward to the different sharing also at the end of this webinar, to hear different reflections on on the different stories and different inputs that we will hear in the next hour or two. Thank you so much. And as we move on, I would like to introduce Reverend James Bagwen, the General Secretary of the Pacific Conference of Churches, who will be giving the opening remarks and prayer.
Nisambula Vinaka and warm greetings from Fiji. I'm speaking to you from the capital city of Suva on the island of Viti Levu, in my home province of Rewa, home to the longest and widest river in Fiji, Nawailevu. Wailevu means great water, but it is more commonly known as the Rewa River. The indigenous community to which I belong, now Vanua or Notho, is both connected to the Rewa Delta and the ocean, which connects our islands, not only to the vast blue Pacific continent of large ocean states, but also by the sea to all of you, if not by coast or by products from the ocean, our seafood, then by the oxygen created in our oceans that you breathe. And following COP26, I paddled 40 kilometers of this river, Nawailevu, on my stand-up paddleboard. And later this year, I will be paddling the entire length of this river for charity and for fun. Well, it's fun for me. Our aquasystems are not only food systems, but life systems, creating oxygen, transporting nutrients. They are both resilient and fragile at the same time. Within the narrative of the blue economy, our rivers and lakes, and particularly our oceans, are being seen as the final frontier for extractive exploitation. And much of our indigenous culture, spirituality, and identity flow with the ocean's tides, with our rivers, connecting our relationships and regulating our very existence through long-term ocean health. For Pacific people, the ocean is much more than a food source. The ocean is our home, our highway, and demonstrates our capabilities as large ocean states. Our indigenous spirituality, the wisdom of our ancients who read the stars and traveled across the mighty ocean in their giant canoes millennia before European discovery and conquest, considered themselves part of the ecosystem and not above it. In the face of climate change, in the face of ongoing environmental degradation and extractive industries, we must be cautious of any narrative that distorts this relationship, that marginalize indigenous and local communities' voices, allowing for the exploitation and extraction of aquasystems and human life, for economic wealth for a few at the expense of so many. We must guard our oceans, our rivers, our lakes from those who would appropriate it as part of a larger development agenda, because this is something that is not equitable for our communities. Let us pray. In the name of the Spirit of God who hovered over the primal waters, in the name of the Word of God who parted the waters for the earth to appear, in the name of the wisdom of God who filled the deep with amazing designs, we give thanks and praise that our oceans, our rivers, and our lakes are immense sources of life to the planet Earth, that they are homes to the myriad of species of flora and fauna. Help us, O Lord, to listen to the cry of currents bearing pollution, to the sigh of bleached and dying coral, to the lament of the hunted turtle, the hunted whale, and the exploited tuna, to an ocean growing at the threat of more blue-washed exploitation and extraction, to rivers under threat from extraction, diverted for the sake of business. As we gather as people, your children, concerned for the well-being of this, our common home, for the well-being of waterways, for the well-being of our people our nations, and the nations of the world. Grant us listening ears, loving hearts, and the wills to work together to effect positive change. Grant us the sharing of pearls from the depth of your wisdom, and grant that we may so honor and care for your gift of creation, so immense, so mysterious, and so marvelous. Grant that our children's children will rejoice that we set out with the intention to care for the health of our rivers, lakes, and oceans, for the well-being of the creatures who are part of your precious creation. We pray in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, who taught on the shores of Galilee, who walked on the stormy sea, and who as the risen one calls us today to faith and courage and action, and who comes bringing healing and health, peace and justice to all God's creation, to all God's people. Amen.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Bonjour. Now, I am pleased to take the lead to moderate this program, this session, and to invite our speakers for the next session, for the next part of the session. So we have three speakers, important, who will give us insights, thoughts, critical reflection regarding the theme food and ocean, rivers, and lakes. And the fourth speaker that I would invite also is will give us a theological reflection and biblical reflections linking to the theme. So may I introduce you Mrs. Christiana Lua. She's from Kenya, from the El Molo Forum. And our second speaker is Professor Dr. Matthew Koshi. He is an environmental scientist, environmental writer, and environmental activist, director of the Church of South India. Our third speaker is Ms. Solange Jetzer, consumer scientist project leader at the Institute Paul Bocuse Research Center in Lyon, France. Welcome. And the fourth speaker is Reverend Dr. Opolu Luma, Principal Pacific Theological College, who will give us the biblical reflection. Welcome to our speakers. We will give you 5 minutes of intervention to explain us, to show us, and to speak about the importance of the linkage from the food, ocean, and rivers and lakes. So our first speakers that I invite to take the floor is Ms. Christiana Lua. Could you share us your thoughts regarding the food intersection with ocean, rivers, and lakes, or injustice or inequity regarding to your expertise and experiences? Thank you. Ms. Christina.
I do not see that she's been able to join at this moment.
All right. All right. So in the meanwhile, let us give the floor to Professor Dr. Matthew Koshi to bring his intervention. Professor Doctor, please, the floor is yours.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am Dr. Matthew Koshi. I am speaking on the recovery health of Pamba River Basin, links to food and livelihood. I hope all of you can hear. Am I audible? Okay.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
1 minute. There are two types of river pollutions. One is chemical pollution and other is river pollution. Whenever there is a industry on the banks of the river, there will be chemical pollution, and this is more dangerous. I got an opportunity to visit Japan in 1989. There I saw the victims of Minamata disease. Minamata disease is due to the organic mercury pollution. First time, the name of the place is known as the name of the disease. This is the first water pollution reported in the world. If you take any book on water pollution, you can see the first chapter, they will mention about the Minamata disease. That is due to chemical poison. The river Pamba originates from Western Ghats, hottest biodiversity hotspot, empties into Vembanad Lake, a Ramsar site, having a length of 176 kilometers and a catchment area of 2,235 square kilometers through the most densely populated regions of the state. There are three reasons for the degradation of Pamba River. First is degradation of the virgin forest at the catchment area. The second is unscrupulous and unscientific mining of river sand. The third point is the water pollution of the river due to fecal coliform bacteria during pilgrimage and domestic usage. The natural forest. The tree roots bind the soil, and about 90% of the water falling on the forest is retained either in the humus or in the plant tissue. The forest thus acts as a soaking device and plays a vital role in the hydrological cycle. The rainwater thus soaked up is gradually released over the days and weeks, which supplies to streams and rivers, even during dry seasons. Hence, retaining the forest cover in the upland catchment area is vital. Due to gradual destruction of forests, wildlife is decreasing and their number is reduced. Rampant deforestation, intensive agriculture activities in the catchment area, industrial, agriculture and domestic pollution, and use of explosives and poison for fishing were the other major threats to the biodiversity of Pamba. 20 years back, there were vast depositions of sand in the riverbed and river banks. But now, deep gullies are formed in the river due to the illegal sand mining and muddy ridges instead of sandy dunes. Uncontrolled and illegal sand mining resulted in environmental hazards, depletion of biodiversity, and drinking water problems. The sand and gravel during sand mining not only affect the feeding and hiding grounds of fishes and other aquatic animals, but also imparts spawning disorders. This may ultimately lead to a decline in inland fishery resources and also protein and energy. The fish biodiversity of the river system is alarmingly declining due to a variety of reasons: obstruction of river courses, regulation and diversification of water flow, damming, sand mining, habitat destruction, loss of riparian canopy cover, deforestation leading to soil erosion, indiscriminate capture of the spawns during the spawning season, and unethical fishing practices such as poisoning, dynamite, and electric fishing. According to a study of CIFRI, the algal and benthic biomass and the diversity were generally low in the river Pampa stretches. 69 species of indigenous fishes and 10 species of exotic non-native fishes contributed to the river's fishery during 2003-2004. The commercial fishery was supported by 57 species recorded during the study period, and 30 species can be treated as threatened, of which 5 species belong to the endangered group and 2 species were absent. The presence of many rare and endemic forms of fish in the river makes it qualify as the freshwater site of exceptional fish diversity. The common dragonflies in the past are very rare nowadays, owing to the loss of their breeding place and humus and sand loam in the riverbanks during the summer. The extinction of dragonflies caused the growth and multiplication of mosquitoes. The larvae of dragonflies eat the larvae of mosquitoes. Absence of predators like dragonflies, the mosquitoes multiplies in the river banks, which is a threat to the breeding place of the fishes. Revival of the proper riparian vegetation is of utmost essential, not only for the conservation of the river ecosystem, but also for a reduction in the ill effects caused by climate change. In short, the health of a riparian and in-stream vegetation is an indicator of the health of the river ecosystem and nature as a whole. Due to the thinning of freshwater flow in the river and rising sea level due to climate change, salinity was reported up to about 50 kilometers upstream of these rivers from saltwater front, and tidal effect is also reported. This will make drinking water pollution all along its banks and destroy the original freshwater ecosystem of the rivers. The whole freshwater ecology of the river is affected by the seeping of saline water. Due to the declining of fishes in rivers, livelihood of inland fishermen are affected. Degradation of the river and basin affects other aquatic lives and other animals living on the banks of the river. We propagate a plant called vetiver, a native of Tamil Nadu. It can recharge groundwater, it can stabilize riverbanks and roads, reduce global warming, prevent soil erosion, reduce coliform bacteria in water, purify contaminated water. These photos are from Thailand. Vetiver can raise groundwater level. Vetiver has been proven globally to be an effective water purifier and anti-soil erosion plant. The native place of vetiver is in Tamil Nadu, South India. However, vetiver is widely used for environmental protection and industrial purposes in many countries, including Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, Australia, and China. The roots can be used in Ayurvedic medicine. The ointment obtained from the root can be used for fragrance. The roots penetrate to the bottom and bind the soil to about 3 meters. It can prevent landslides. The overflowing of the water will be stopped and the soil can be deposited there. The sharp leaves and fragrant roots repel snakes, germs, and pests. The leaves and roots are immune. Young grass can be used as fodder. Once rooted, it survives droughts and floods. Planting vetiver in highly polluted areas can help reduce pollution. Vetiver has been shown to reduce the levels of coliform bacteria. Roots and leaves are used to make handicrafts. Vetiver is a plant that can withstand pollution and disasters and can be cultivated profitably. That is why the plant is called Rolls Royce. One of the biggest problems facing the world today is global warming. Vetiver can absorb methane, a gas that causes this. Vetiver can be used as a fence. It will stand for us as a strong fence for 60 years. The Pathanamthitta District Panchayat President inaugurated vetiver planting on the Pamba river banks on 21st January 2022 under the auspices of Kerala State Biodiversity Board and Pamba River Rejuvenation Project. Over 2 lakhs of vetiver saplings were planted on the banks of the river Pamba in 14 panchayats, through which the Pamba River flows. As a member of the Pamba River Rejuvenation Project Committee and the District Biodiversity Monitoring Committee, I was delighted to participate in this event. My doctoral research was on the pollution of Pamba River. The research students under my supervision researched vetiver and published it in international journals. They substantiated these findings in their research. The CSI Synod, Department of Ecological Concerns, has undertaken the planting of vetiver as a project and promotes it wherever possible. We distributed vetiver in many places. In a World Environment Day celebration, we inaugurated the conference by planting a vetiver plant in a pot. 2 bishops also were present there. Outcome anticipated. It will improve the biodiversity of the banks of the river, stabilizing the river banks, avoid landsliding, riparian vegetation on the banks will improve the health of a river, improve the aquatic quality due to the sand mining restrictions. Fishermen depending on the river fish will come back. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Koshi, for this important presentation and information regarding the vetiver. Even in Madagascar, we use vetiver, and it is very benefits for us. And our next speaker is Miss Christiana Lua, who is the So Ms. Christina Lua is the co-chair of the World Forum of Fisher Peoples, and she is, as I said, from Kenya. So the floor is yours, Ms. Christina. Thank you.
Thank you so much for giving me the floor. I don't know if I'm clear. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Thank you. So I'm happy to join all of you in this webinar on food from oceans, rivers, and lakes. And I would like to start by giving the wisdom of our elders, the El Molo people. In fact, I come from the El Molo community, which is a traditional indigenous people's community which lives and survives on fishery and fishing. And to an El Molo, the El Molo's lives revolves around waters, around the lake, and from birth to death. And all the activities of an El Molo are evolving around the lake, our cultures, our spirituality, our lifestyle. Everything is about the lake and the waters. Therefore, our ancestors gave us some wisdom, and I'm just going to quote one. Listen, my child, listen. Listen, my child, listen. Take care of the lake or the waters, and to take care of you. That means your family, your community. Destroy the lake and the ecosystem or the environment, and it will destroy you. That means destroy you, your family, your communities, your nation. That is the basic truth and knowledge that you need to live every day. I'll also give the WFFP Daily Declaration, 7th General Assembly 2017. We are witnessing a collective struggles from across the world by communities who are being dispossessed. Women are leading battles to resist efforts to wipe out our histories, homogenize our identity and culture. We are struggling against neoliberal forces and the historical consequences of colonialism and post-colonialism. The grabbing of our resources is nothing new. And yet, oceans, lakes, water, and land grabbing today is taking many new forms and is justified in new ways. We find ourselves in conflicts with extractive industries, the expansion of big infrastructure projects, as well as capital intensive fisheries, aquaculture, and agriculture. All of these are known to be worsening climate change. And therefore, I was also asked to speak about the challenges faced by small-scale fishers and fishing communities. So our major challenge today, currently, we are struggling with disasters, risk, and climate change. So climate change is a big thing all over the world now. So we are experiencing continuous rising of water levels of our oceans, seas, lakes, and even rivers. This is a global phenomenon that has continued to make great losses and suffering amongst small-scale fishers, fishing communities, and indigenous peoples all over the world. Loss of homes, properties, equipment, infrastructure, fishing, and breeding grounds, and loss of animals and people has really brought a lot of problems and to the small-scale fisher communities. We are experiencing a very severe drought right now in northern Kenya. Very severe in that people are losing their lives and animals. And also the drought is also experienced in the waters. I'm not very sure how these two are related, but they usually go hand in hand. When we have very severe prolonged drought on the land, we also experience kind of drought in the waters, in that we get very, very low harvests or nothing. And therefore, our people in the northern Kenya are really suffering because of these prolonged droughts. And climate change and disasters have implications on food security and nutrition of fishing communities and indigenous peoples. The highest priority is to assert customary land water rights over the coast and other landscapes. Small-scale fishers and fishing communities contribute the least to climate change, but are the most affected and impacted by climate change and are most vulnerable to its impacts. The alarming reports by the Interpanel of Climate Change, IPCC, and its special reports on the oceans and land needs to be overseen in relation with the small scale guidelines to secure sustainable fisheries in the context of food security and poverty eradication. So they are, okay, so this, and strategies to address climate and disaster risk should be incorporated with the SSF guidelines. So another challenge we are facing as small-scale fishers and fishing communities is the fact or non-recognition of indigenous peoples and small-scale fisher communities' cultural and traditional knowledge. The cultures, customary laws, traditional, indigenous or local knowledge, and science of indigenous peoples and small-scale fishers and fishing communities were instrumental in sustaining the oceans, seas, lakes, environment, communities, and traditional nations for centuries. But these have been overtaken by national laws which do not support all the aspects of conserving and sustaining the waters and environment. Lack of recognition of the SSF, indigenous peoples' cultures and traditional knowledge and customary laws and local knowledge, and incorporating this in laws and instruments that govern fisheries has led to destruction and unhealthy water bodies, destruction of the ecosystem, overfishing, and very poor harvest the world over. Decades of advocacy to see this incorporated and adapted at all levels has continuously been ignored. The other challenge is implementation of unfriendly laws, policies, or policy instruments. Implementation of unfriendly laws and policies that have impacted negatively on SSF communities and even caused their territories be disposed from their rights holders, for example, because we find that preference is given to other, the groups they call user rights holders, instead of giving more privilege to the rights holders who are actually living in their territories. The beach, for instance, the beach management units in Lake Turkana, Kenya, have really dispossessed the El Molo people of their land, in that many people have migrated because of the laws, the lax laws in the country that have dispossessed the El Molo people of their land and encourage other communities, dominant communities, to come to their area and do fisheries, although they are not traditional fisher folks, but are doing it for money. This is because the law allows any Kenyan to go anywhere in the country and do their business. And therefore, these people come freely and encroach and overtake the territories of small-scale fishers and fishing communities, indigenous peoples. And therefore, we find that this law or this policy is causing a lot of suffering to us and dispossessing us, not only of our land and waters, but other natural resources. We also have a problem with the marine spatial planning. And here I'm giving an example of Indonesia, where our colleagues from KNTI, that is Kesatuan Nelayan Traditional Fisher, Artisanal Fishers, is a big small-scale fishers organization, and it's a member of WFFP. Also with TNI, that is Transnational Institute colleagues, who compiled the report called Marine Spatial Planning, Resolving or Entrenching Conflicts Over and in Ocean Space. Oh my God, my battery. So the so-called, okay, and their findings, although this was the marine spatial planning is supposed to is envisioned as a conflict mitigation process which allocates marine space in a national manner to different users. That minimizes conflict of interest, but as instead increase the conflicts. And some of their findings is that based on this, on their research, they argue that the case of Indonesia, the initial outcomes of the marital spatial planning have not lived up to its promise. And this can be summarized. First, the introduction of MSP into national legal framework was facilitated by the long-standing influence of international development agencies on policy-making processes, combined with the large number of different sectors competing for ocean resources, which are of central importance to the country's economy. So they found out that there were more conflicts due to this MSP, and some of them were governance conflicts. So it has caused tension within governments over the rollout of the MSP. The village scale conflicts, it has created conflicts within communities, especially over how resettlement is handled. Gender conflict, it has exacerbated existing tensions in gender relations. Social and environmental conflicts over extraction conflict between fishers and other ocean activities has not been dealt with, but displaced. Ecological problems, job loss, and piracy have deepened more these conflicts. I don't know if my battery will allow me to finish. So we have good practices. So I was invited as the co-chair of WFFP by cooperatives in Istanbul, Turkey. And I really visited quite a number of them. I don't know if Manaj could also show pictures from my presentations, which I had emailed to him. And what is so positive and good practice about the fishers of Marmara Sea, which have joined in fishing and also to see their marketing, their markets and all, is rotational fishing in Marmara Sea. It's a law that 6 months the Marmara Sea is closed and the area is allowed to heal and also for fish to produce, and then 6 months they fish. And this is a very good practice because in our areas, especially in my country, there are no laws such as this that actually protect the lake or the waters, even the oceans, and do rotational or put laws that allow the waters to heal and the ecosystem. In our cultural practices, like the Elmo law, we do rotational fishing, and the Council of Elders oversees that everybody follows the actual laid down customary laws to manage fisheries and the environment. And these are followed to the letter, and this has helped us sustain our environment and sustain our communities. Implementation of the voluntary guidelines is also another good practice for us as small-scale fishers, and we wish all the member states that have ratified the voluntary guidelines for securing sustainable small-scale fisheries in the context of food security and poverty eradication to implement the guidelines. This is the only instrument that recognizes the rights of small-scale fishers. And we are really appealing to all of you and all our friends to help us in pushing forward this to ensure that the member states implement this document. And we also think that bottom-up solutions to address the various problems faced by the SSF are necessary because are essential. Because most of these laws and policies governing fisheries are brought from up to down. And they are not really, those people who sit in the boardrooms and plan these things are not aware of the issues and situations in the oceans, in the lakes, and amongst the small-scale fishers. And therefore, solutions ought to come from the bottom, from the small-scale fishers themselves. So I think I'll stop there. Thank you very much for giving me the floor.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Christiana, for these valuable inputs and for representing small-scale fishers. I would like to remind speakers, our next speakers, to try to get on time still, since we are running back of time. So our next speaker is Ms. Solen. As we were talking of blue economy. Now we will talk more about new horizons in blue foods, as she is working as project leader in at the Institute of Paul Bocuse Research Center in Lyon. The floor is to you, Ms. Solen.
Thank you very much, Thierry. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So today I would like to talk to you briefly about how microalgae can present itself as a potential future important food source. So first of all, you might have come across algae in your diet. This would depend maybe from where you come from, what your food culture is. Actually, a consumption of algae dates back at least to 14,000 BC, according to archaeological data. In Japan, algae consumption can go up to about 10 grams per day. So you may have come across this if you've an aficionado of sushi, or maybe you've come across it as a superfood or a green powder in your supermarkets. Or today, you can also find them introduced as an ingredient in pasta, used as different oils, or also now more and more used to create plant-based alternatives to either meat or fish products. So now that we know a bit about algae, I would like to share what microalgae is. So microalgae is a microscopic algae which is invisible to the naked eye as a unique cell. However, we can see them when they cluster together in hundreds or thousands. These are actually phytoplankton, and they live in the water source itself, so in fresh and marine systems. We estimate today that there are over 100,000 to several million types of different microalgae. But actually, scientists have only characterized about 25,000 of these. So there are still a great source of inspiration that we can take from these tiny microorganisms. They are used in various industries because their properties are very much diverse. They can be found as biofuels. They can also be used in the pharmaceutical and medical industries, as well as being used as a food source. So why are microalgae actually an interesting food crop to think about? Well, first of all, they are highly sustainable because they do not need arable land to grow. They can either grow in the water itself or cultivated on land. They are also renewable and self-sufficient. They absorb CO2 and grow through photosynthesis, so they only need a source of light and carbon to grow. There are also a concentration of nutritional properties. They are rich in protein. They are also rich in polyunsaturated fatty acids. So this is our important omega-3s. Currently know that particularly in Western societies, we do not have sufficient omega-3s in our diet. We do not meet the recommendations of 250 milligrams per day. And therefore, it's very interesting to think about different sources of omega-3s, specifically coming from a plant-based source. They also contain many bioactive compounds with potential effects on health, such as antioxidants. But even though microalgae have multiple applications, there's actually no large-scale production of microalgae today. So just for knowledge, this is how microalgae can be cultivated on land. So they can be cultivated in small factories or industries in what we call photobioreactors, where microalgae will be placed in these tubes with a light source and a source of CO2, so they can grow and then be cultivated. They will then be extracted and used in the various products we've talked about. So microalgae is an interesting food source to think about because of its nutritional properties, but it also has different applications for food, which are also pertinent. So first of all, microalgae are so very rich in omega-3s, which are a very important nutrient for us humans. Unfortunately, lipids are very susceptible to oxidation and degradation. This is what causes, for example, the rancid taste that you can have in oils and butters if you leave them out too long. And utilizing microalgae actually for a source of oil could increase the stability of these omega-3 fatty acids because there is an increased presence of antioxidants within the microalgae. Microalgae can also improve textural properties of different foods. It can be used as a thickening or as a textural agent. For example, you may have come across agar-agar as used in baking. Microalgae also has a very unique sensorial properties, so it could enhance the taste of specific foods and is showing a lot of promise in different culinary applications. As sensorial properties, it could substitute, for example, salt or the fish taste of certain food products. However, there are some limitations to take under consideration when thinking about microalgae as a food source. So firstly, there's the high cost of using these types of biomasses and cultivating them. They are live microorganisms, which can be proved quite challenging to use in industrial processes because of the technical issues surrounding their use. Also, specifically in the EU market, but also globally, there are very actually few microalgae species that are authorized for human consumption. There are only around 10, and the most known are spirulina and chlorella. Globally, obviously depending on the culture, but there is very little knowledge and current consumption of microalgae. There tends to be more algae consumed in different forms, but microalgae is very much a niche product. So to conclude, I would like to talk about the project I'm currently working on. So at the research center of the Institut Paul Bocuse, which is in Lyon. This is, the project is called SCALE. So the scaling up of the cultivation and production of microalgae. This is a 48-month project, so around 4 years, and and has an investment from the European Union and Commission. It is a consortium of 11 partners working on this project, and their objectives is so to create a flagship project and plant to cultivate microalgae in France. to ensure its sustainability, in ensuring that the production generates no waste. And also the part that I am intervening in is to supply the market with products that can be used by the end consumer. So I'm specifically focusing on food applications, but there are also other partners looking at food supplements, feed, and cosmetics. So I invite you to keep up with the project as we go along. We've just started, in September 2021, and it will run up to September 2024. So thank you very much for your attention.
Wow, thank you so much. It was very impressive, and I wish you all the best to your project, which is very important and interesting, dear Solène. Now, before entering to the group work, I would like to invite Reverend Dr. Opolo Luma Vai to bring us a biblical and theological reflection linking to creation, water, and sustainability.
Thank you. Hopefully Manoj will share my presentation. I was invited to speak on a biblical reflection, theological reflection on the intersection between creation, food, water, and sustainability to the accountability of humanity as stewards and co-creators. Thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you. Why as Genesis? I will be using the term why rather than water, as it speaks louder to our Pacific way of thinking. Why in Samoa, or why in Fiji, or also in Aotearoa, New Zealand, Maori. In where I'm from, wai is a generic term for rivers, oceans, streams, etc. If we say wai is the genesis of life, it means water is the point of departure, the hermeneutical lens that reimagines everything, including food, sustainability, and etc. I would like to offer some indigenous philosophical and theological foundation of wai as central to life. But let me begin with the one of the greatest story written, but also one of the greatest mismanaged, misinterpreted story, because it normally targets kinds of theories or philosophies that are not really addressing the importance of the land and ocean and rivers. So Genesis 1, the most popular story, one of the popular narrative in the Bible. Life begins with wai. The world emerged from the womb of wai. Wai is the genesis of everything. Integral to wai was darkness. And as we read the story from verse 1 up to verse 5 and 6, that's very clear because it is key to its revitalization. Darkness is key to the revitalization of wai. The gift of wai to creation was darkness. And I would like to re-emphasize this. The gift of wai to creation was darkness. The Spirit did not remove darkness, as in a normal interpretation of the story, but rather made it the source of life. The Spirit acted as a midwife to bring forth light out of the womb of darkness on the first day. On day 2, the Spirit created the world from wai. If we trace, therefore, the lineage of darkness and light, we trace it back to light, to wai. light and darkness, the key energies that power the world today, are children of Vai. It makes sense, therefore, what Morna Simeona said, I come forth from the void into the light, from gestation into a vast space of affirmation. This come forth from void also happens in a mother's womb, the watery, dark home for life. No wonder why Vai is the first turf the spirit chose to be present on, the home of the spirit in the Genesis story. In a dominant creation story, creation narrative and interpretation of this text, we've put too much emphasis on guarding and policing the boundaries between the creator and the created, God and the world, that we miss the whole point of creation that is also reminded to us by quantum physics, and that is relationship. We often lose the idea that we were all born of relationships. In the beginning was relationship. Vai reminds us that we come from a womb of multiple relationships, forth from the void. My suggestion is that we need to shift our creation story from the notion of being created to being related. The former is more passive, more hierarchical, and very ex nihilo focused, and normally doesn't work when it comes to the notion of stewardship. The later is more relational, mutual, and life-giving. Next, please. The next one, next please, is Vai consciousness. Change comes when we reconfigure our consciousness. And I think that is the issue at the moment, is the issue of mindsets, of consciousness. When Pacifica people read this creation story, it affirms Vai as Genesis. For Pacifica people, Vai is everything. It's under us, it's around us, it's in us, it's before us, it's behind us. Vai is always transspatial. Pacifica people believe that they have their genesis in the Moana, in the blue ocean, the liquid people, as some countries call it. The ocean is our home. We grew up with a Vai consciousness. And this is perhaps one of the issues when it comes to some of the global organizations, because normally from a land-based perspective, the Pacific is not considered a continent because it is not big enough as land. But the Pacific, of course, is a blue continent. This Vai consciousness is recaptured in the recent development framework of the Pacific Islands Forum called the Blue Pacific Continent, which is all about reclaiming this Vai consciousness, this Earth consciousness, which is at the heart of Pacific sustainability. But I would also say that the issue now is because we no longer have Vai consciousness, that deep kinship connection with water. Due to the commodification, we become water illiterate or Vai illiterate. Losing this consciousness for many Pacific people is like losing our way back home. Next, please. Next one is Vai healing. In Exodus 15, 22, sorry, Vai healing, yep. Exodus 15, 22 to 25, the Jews from Egypt arrived at a water reservoir only to find it as unfit to drink. God told Moses to desalinate the bitter waters by throwing in a stick, a natural method to clean the water. 2 Kings chapter 2, 19 to 22, water supply was undrinkable. then Elisha the prophet ordered the people to add salt. From an eco-relational perspective, the healing of Vai mainly comes from the understanding the mutual connection of land and water. In fact, one heals the other because one is part of the other. I remember what we used to do when living in an inland village when I was young, with only one stream to depend on. During rainy, flood seasons, we cut coconut trees, coconut leaves, and throw them into the river, not only to divert dirt, but also to help in purifying the water. Dirt finds the coconut leaves as its home for up to 2 weeks. So dirt can attract dirt. Coconut leaves can attract dirt and clean up dirt in the water for up to 2 weeks. When we do this, it's like we are standing at the moment of new beginnings, according to Pohai Medeiros. Every day there is a disaster, including climate change. But life is not so much about dealing with a disaster, which many now calls disaster management, but rather about creating new beginnings in the face of disasters. And this is all what resilience is all about. Next, please. Next one is Vai hospitality. I am the source that branches out from the taproot of enlightenment of relational knowledge. I am the Buna, the spring of profound connection which fountains forth from the depths into the pool of learning for ourselves as well as for others. This is the Hawaiian wisdom. The basis of all biblical hospitality is the water offered to every guest to wash his or her feet, as in Genesis 18:4, as well as 24, verse 32. This extends even to those merely passing by. Travel was merely dependent on being offered water, and relationships were based on this. Lack of water was potential political betrayal and rebellion, as in Exodus 15:22-25. Vai hospitality is linked to relationship building in the Pacific, as it also happens in the Jewish community. After any disaster, water or Vai is the first thing to be restored. This is normally a community effort. This is because not only people depend on it, food security depends on it, but also relationship building depends on it. Vai reinforces the we are principle of life, as opposed to the we have principle of the market-driven economy. Next, please. Next one is Vai ownership. The issue today is the ownership issue, and it's an issue worldwide. It's an issue also in the Pacific. Ownership is always problematic when it comes to Pacific cultures, because we also find it in we also find it in the Bible. For example, in the story of Jacob and Jerah's herdsmen arguing over the ownership of Jacob's well in Genesis 26:17-22. Because most Pacific cultures believe in cosmic kinship and lineage, we don't own water or the land. Rather, it is the other way around. The land and the water owns us. Ownership promotes a we have mentality as opposed to the we are. Driven by the terra nullius idea, which later became the foundation of the capitalist neoliberal philosophy, we strive for water ownership. For example, in Samoa water laws and in Fiji water laws, the commercialization of Vai means that all rivers and streams and all land beneath watermark belongs to the state. While this profit generation stream for countries, today this commodification of water also marginalizes many families in Pacific who do not have the means to support themselves. So while we talk about the Sustainable Development Goal, for example, SDG 6 is about clean water and sanitation, safe water for drinking for everyone, some people can't even afford clean water today because of commodification of water. Accessibility is the greatest threat caused by the notion of ownership and the centralization of water under the banner of democracy and freedom. So, as Simon Critchley said, without constraint, without captivity, freedom rapidly becomes the meaningless exercise of arbitrariness. And arbitrariness is very dangerous to long-term sustainability. Next one. Please, next slide. I think 2 more slides, very short. Why in the Pacific way of thinking is not just liquid. Why is the whole. The liquid, which is the vai, the source, which is called matavai, the stream, which is called alavai, the riverbed, which is called ta'eleolevai, and the riverside, which is called the si'olevai. The metal, to meddle with one is to meddle with the whole system that sustains not just the river or ocean, but the whole surrounding and its regenerative economic system. Vai is a Trinitarian structure. Already there is a relationship structure. This is the Trinitarian structure which I would prefer to call an eco-relational whole of life structure, which is more the Trinitarian structure, that we cannot just say vai is liquid. Vai is everything, including the bed, the riversides, and everything. In the Pacific, we have a new threat, which could be a water curse to many of us. Once water is cursed, we are all cursed. This threat is called deep sea mining. Deep sea mining is a new vai extraction and ownership development project that will affect all Pacific communities who depend on the ocean for survival. So William Sloane Coffin reminds us that it is a great mistake to talk, as many political leaders do, of balancing the needs of the economy with those of the environment. An economy, national or world, is a subsystem of the ecosystem. Therefore, we cannot speak of growth as an unquestioned good. Next, please. The last one is vai stewardship. Stewardship is a problematic doctrine that is always anthropocentric, linear, and capitalist driven, especially around the notion of caring for, especially the narrative that we need to care for vai or for land or for creation for our needs. Our human needs in this dominant narrative is the driving force, is the central force of why we need to protect creation. The issue is that different countries have different levels of needs. And some countries, such as big countries, require massive resources to serve their lifestyle needs. The question is, how can we care for something that we are not deeply connected to, that is not part of us? We need to shift from the notion of caring for to connecting with. A shift from a needs-driven stewardship to a relationship-driven stewardship. To be there and to be caring for creation should start with the resolve to be with. It is only that we are deeply connected to something, that we feel it's in us, that we feel it's part of us, that we honestly care for it. And with this, meeting our needs should follow. But to change stewardship theology, we need to restore and change our creation theology, moving from the creation theology of being created to being related, allows us to be accountable to our eco-relations. This sense of theirs, central to the Emmanuel and incarnational faith of the Church, I think is key to sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Doctor, for that theological and biblical reflection. It was so important. Now we are moving to the next part. And before entering to the breakout for groups, I would like to give the floor to the WCC technical team, Albin, to lead us for that and for technical announcement.
Yes, hello everyone. Hello Siri. So we are going to move to part 2 and the breakout room. We will be divided into small groups, and I invite you to think about the following question that I am writing to you in the chat box in English and French. So in your groups, please choose one person to make a short summary of your discussion when we are all together again. So thank you.
Hello everyone, and welcome back from the breakout sessions. We're going to start our feedback session, and I'm told there are quite a number of groups today because there were about 80 of us in the session. Oh yes, so we're going to have to be mindful of our time. If you can limit it to about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes maximum, in terms of our feedback, and then so that we can keep time. I'll start with group 1, and then as you're ready, please just come on. I don't have the names of the group representatives, but I was with George in my group, George in our group. So group 1, please, when you're ready, give us some feedback.
So we have been group 1, right? Yeah, thank you. It was time was short. We could not work on all these 3 questions. We started and then had been interrupted. First of all, the first question was the vital role of water bodies as source of food. We shared a little bit of living close to the Lake of Geneva, or what it means to be close to the water, but not really knowing on how much we depend on the water resources there. Rajesh shared about India, and I shared a little bit about prawn peeling processes in the north of Germany, where prawns are harvested, but then transported 6,000 kilometers back and forth to Morocco to be peeled and then sold back in Germany, which is a process of marketing and capitalistic way of using the resources, the marine resources. Then our colleague from the Amity Foundation, Hong Kong, shared also what it means to live on the small island. And she saw over the 10-20 years a big change in the fish markets locally, where 10 years back, 20 years back, big fishes have been marketed, and now only smaller fishes only are available. And the question is why? Maybe because of pollution, maybe because of climate change. There is a substantial change in this, which might be worrying. Yeah, and we like the theological meditation, which we heard also, that in general, it's not about caring for nature, it's being part of nature, being connected with the environment and depending on it, which could give us an answer of how to tackle these problems. To come to the second question, we are in a kind of interdependent process. Like, you know, the prawn peelers in Morocco, they will depend on this work. So we are somehow connected, but we are in a system of capitalistic ways of marketing all these products from the seas and the waters, which is not sustainable. But on the other side, people are depending on it. Their work employments depend on it. So how can we get out of it? And then the colleague from Amity Foundation shared, which I found interesting. Then we have been interrupted, a kind of system in mainland China of river sharing, river share system. She was just exploring that. And then the time was unfortunately over. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Is Group 2 ready to share with us their reflection?
This is Diana. We really don't have a report. We really only kind of got through a couple of people who talked about the importance of water to life. If you don't have water, water is just so important to life. And the other remark, I think, was about the use of water for expensive harvesting, like caviar from fish, at the expense of water being available for everyone. Those are kind of the two remarks that we talked about.
Thank you, Diana. This does bring us back to the point of sustainability in terms of livelihoods.
Yeah.
At what cost, do we sustain the economic benefit, so to speak? And so what can we do to remain connected and then in turn care for creation like that? Does Group 3 want to share some reflections in terms of recommendations of advocacy and action moving forward?
I think we were Group 3, if I'm not mistaken. So I think what we had was that we had a very large mix of different people coming from different cultures, which is always very enriching to have the opportunity to share. What we took away was really the contrast we have between potentially people living in big cities where the connection to water body and water sources is not so evident. In comparison to other communities who are very much living in the water and with the water on a daily basis and have that deep connection with these water sources. So I think as a recommendation that we could put forward is really the importance to maybe have these discussions with the people living in the city dwellers, let's say, that have sort of lost this relationship, to put forward the importance and the meaning of these water bodies for everyone, for life, for ecosystems. And that was it.
Thanks, Celine. That is true. I think more communication amongst ourselves would probably help us also relate better with our environments. Group 4, are you ready to share with us?
Good afternoon. I think we have discussed about the importance of water and the ecological concerns that are arising in all around the world. I think the topics that we discuss and the seminars and the kind of awarenesses, the solutions that we are making, and these things have to be reached to the grassroots level. That was one of the concerns that was raised by one of the fathers who were, I think, discussing in that group. And another important thing is, I think we have so much concerns, and we have developed countries, developing countries, and third world countries. I think it is everyone's responsibility to join our hands and to stand for the solidarity and stand for one cause, that is to save the earth and to save water bodies and all the solutions. I think we have been taking so many solutions and answers, finding out so many answers for various questions. But I think it is very important that it is reaching to the local communities. It is reaching to the context. It is reaching to the particular circumstances where the problem is coming. So that was the main concept, and I think the topic that we have discussed in our group.
Thank you so much. Are we on group 5 now?
Okay, I think I was in group 5, if I'm not mistaken. So our group had the two parts of the discussion. One is the algae, the microalgae, the phytoplanktons captured the attention of the group. And Bishop Seraphim was asking the 15 billion euros for this, whereas with this research and the support, but Global South people don't get much financial support for protecting their fisheries, etc. And again, there was an interesting dimension of how is it also ethically correct to take the phytoplanktons, etc., which is vital for the river bodies, water bodies, for human consumption, but they're also equally needed for the aquatic creatures. And therefore, in a controlled way, can we promote doing that? And in Global South, some of the algae become the main cause of killing the water bodies because they pollute so much also. And this is the question. And one interesting advocacy came is that stop using river sand for construction that is mostly widely spread in South India, and also how a good practice was promoted by Church of South India, one of the college by Dr. Moses, and that how they made sure that the sewers was treated before dumping into the rivers. So this is how like 3 different dimensions were discussed in our group. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It does sound like it was an enriching discussion, especially the scientific part of it. Are those all the groups that we have?
Yes, no, I have a report for groups 6. Thank you, Katligo.
Right.
It was quite a short time, unfortunately. But what came was that there were some communities which have been deeply involved with the water bodies, like Reverend Joseph Dasan, who lives around in the region called Lake Kolero in Andhra Pradesh, between 2 districts, and it's a very important ecological group because it's also a place where birds from Siberia come in winter, etc. But the people are having problems because this land, the lake, has been converted by the powerful communities for aquaculture and ponds, creating ponds and contamination. And the people, indigenous people and the oppressed, marginalized communities are made to work. So the kind of oppression and instrumentalization of natural resources, similar to what Christina was saying, but also Christina, there was also experience of floods and in Germany, etc., where communities are facing a lot of challenges. They did not see it as an important aspect, but similar to what in people living near water bodies, they have experienced exceptional situations. But also Debbie, so that came from Constance, but the Debbie from Seattle joining in very late at night, she was also very much fascinated by the theological reflection, and the discussion we were saying was that I think we should also look through the lens of our own indigenous narratives when we read these creation stories, and radically look at of relationships rather than domineering. So it was a very good discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Manish. It's true. I think the invitation to look through the lens of our own indigenous and various faiths or belief systems, customary cultural faith systems, is true. That it would help us facilitate better relationships with our environment. So group 7, are you ready to share?
And people can click the interpretation if it's produced in French.
Hello?
Yes.
Thank you. We can hear
Merci.
you.
Le groupe 7, il y avait le Togo, le Bénin et
Benin and Madagascar. On the first question, we've said yes. our relationship with water. Is clear. Life is water. Water is life. And several deities are related to water, and they are represented by water or sea. As a consequence, our identity and the relationship between water bodies and human beings are related to some names, and sometimes we call our children according to these water bodies. And actually, water is the womb, and in Madagascar, we have a saying that says that water is life, and that there is, and in Benin, water is life as well. Second question, we've said it. Some traditional experiences from Sabbath allowed rivers and lakes to recover. And actually, water body users would recover as well with Sabbath. But today, with Christianism and colonization, this system has been put aside. As a consequence, water is overexploited. There is pollution, and this leads to a lot of damages. As a consequence, we have a few recommendations. First of all, we need to think about the previous system to restore water bodies. And we need to work with state and institutional bodies, religious institutions and administrative institutions. We need to think together about the relationship we have with water. This is pivotal. We need to think about this relationship. And finally, we need to make the community understand that water is us, that we are water. Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you so much for that. And we appreciate the input on the collaboration being important amongst various institutions, including religious bodies and government, so that we think together and think about our relationship with water. Group 8, that's the final group that will have shared with us their reflection, please.
I believe all groups have reported.
All right. Thank you so much. That brings us to the end of our program, and I'll hand over to Manoj for the closing.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. Thank you very much, all of you, friends. This, to sum this up, is not humanly possible, because the richness of this session, the great wisdom of this session, cannot be encapsulated. I'm deeply grateful, but I can just say that from this session, like I'm reminded of the indigenous Inca cosmology, which says at every moment, the past, the present, and the future coexists. So this presentation was like that, because when we look at food and water, the past and the present and the future are happening together. We heard from Christiana, we heard from the youth voices, we heard how, and all from your groups, how important our indigenous wisdom is, how important our ancestors' messages and wisdom was, that how important rest and recovery is important. And the theological the reflection so richly gave us the insights into the importance of relationships. And we know that this present is dependent on our past. We know that we have to take care. And we heard from the youth voices, the young scientists, Soleil, etc., how we can look to the future. The food and water continues and will continue to be a source of life. But it was very, very moving to see that what is happening today, though we are linked to the past and the future, can actually decide on the trajectory of how our future generations will live on the earth. What we do now, what we advocate now, will actually decide how our future generations will cope and live. And I think it was also very, very beautiful and important for us to see this wisdom of interpretation, that to look at our religious texts through the lens of our own cultures, as Professor Upolo has done. It is so important. And so I think I will not, what I can say is I would like to deeply thank you, each and every resource person. I thank you also the voices of the young people, including our scientists and including, you are not the future, you are the present. We thank you, people from the grassroots, all of you who have participated. And of course, thank you, Christiana, who had the voice, who was the voice of the fisher folk, and for the struggles, and for reminding us the struggles. We are together. And as Reverend Upolo said, it is about relationships. It is not about domination, because we are one and we are nothing without each other. This is an important time for us. And let us hold hands across time zones. And let's join together in prayer. And while I thank all of you, I will say that we will have the recording put up today, but also we'll make available all the resources and the speeches, and we'll have also a summary informing you and updating you. And we will have these discussions every month. Let's pray. Loving Lord, thank you very much for this opportunity that you have given us to join our hands together across time zones, across the barriers of land and water and language, that you have transformed these barriers to a uniting force, and for us to be made aware of the importance of water as the source of life, that water, that the void which has come from void, which has given us life. Bless us in all that we do. Bless us that we will care for creation, that rather than dominion, it will be about relationships. Help us to relate for each other and respect for each other. Thank you for this time, and help us to move forward this day and the rest of the year with great focus and with a sense of purpose, to ensure that the world will be sustainable for generations to come. Through Jesus Christ our Lord.